So when this body was about 28 or 26 years old, I started traveling astrally to visit Swami, and I've been doing so on a regular basis since then. I don't need to go and see Swami in the physical form anymore, because if I wish to, I can go and see him on the astral form. I don't need a passport, I don't need a visa, there's no jet lag, there's no Sevadals telling me to Sairam, please move this way and that way. It's very simple and very free. And Swami loves it. You know, this Sathya Sai avatar has only given us one mantra to repeat, and that is to say every day that I am God, I am God, I am God, I am not different from God. When you condition the mind to such thinking, then eventually you believe it. When you believe it, you become it. That's all. That's the truth. That's who you really are.
Welcome to SOULJOURNS, a continuing series of interviews with followers of Indian holy man Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Dr. Srikanth Sola, a cardiologist, left the world-famous Cleveland Clinic to work full-time at Sai Baba's Superespecialty Hospital in Bangalore, India. His story is all about Sai Baba. This interview was recorded in Cleveland, Ohio in June of 2008.
I want to begin by asking you just to share a little bit about where you grew up, your childhood, and the first time you can actually recall Sai Baba coming into your consciousness, either through your parents or somebody sharing with you his name.
Sairam Ted. After so long, it seems like those incidents were so long ago, because I don't really identify with those memories or events anymore, but I'll do the best that I can. This body was born in India, then came to the US at a relatively young age, about 6 years old, and my earliest memories of anything that most people would call spiritual would be probably when I was 3 or 4, and I remember seeing angels and devas and deities and departed souls and others sort of just around. And I would interact with them, and they would interact with me in meaningful ways. And I thought that everybody could see them. It was part of my life, even at that early age. And when I would tell the grown-ups about them, they would say, oh, that's nice, and sort of pat me on the head and send me on my way, because they certainly couldn't see them. And what I thought was, gosh, if these grown-ups can't see them, my teachers and parents and elders and so forth, then maybe I'm not supposed to be seeing these things. And so I put those things away for quite some time. Then went on through life and was a reasonably good kid for the most part. Was very successful at an early age, won all these awards and honors, and went to very prestigious universities, and et cetera, et cetera. But despite all these successes, at about age 18 or so, I realized that something was missing. I didn't have God in my life or religion in my life, but I knew that something was missing, and I wasn't sure what it was. One summer, about the age of 19, I was working at a summer camp in the Sierra Nevada mountains in California, large mountains on the eastern part of the state. Was teaching art classes there for adults, and my day off I would go hiking in the mountains just behind the camp. And there I would have these tremendous experiences of love, of peace, of joy, of happiness. And I would feel that, and I could see that I could actually communicate with the devas and the spirits that were around me. Everything was alive to me, everything was consciousness, and everything was God. And that was when I became aware that God was everything. God was in everything, as everything. And slowly, at that age, about 19 years old, became aware that God was there. A few months later, I went to India to visit my relatives there. And on the flight, just happened to sit next to a Western devotee who was going to see Sai Baba. And he showed me a book that he was reading, and I says, oh, I've seen his photo before. In fact, I think I've seen him before. And he told me that Sai Baba was God. And when I heard that, I said, yeah, you're right. I know that. I hadn't heard of Sai Baba really before then. But when I first heard about it, I knew that that was the case. If someone says the sky is blue, you would say, yes, it is. If someone says to me, Sai Baba is God, I'd say, yes, that's the truth. Now, at this stage, though, I move beyond that. Sai Baba is God, but you're also God. I'm God. Everything is God. And that's where I live now.
What do you think accounts for that sudden and total downloading of this spiritual insight at the age of 17, 18, 19?
It just is, Ted. I mean, there's some people might say previous karmas, some people might say previous births. I don't know. What I do know is that each of us makes a choice at every moment in our lives. We can choose to be the God beings that we are, or we can choose to live in Maya. You know, once a friend of mine was in Parthi, and actually, I'm sorry, in Bangalore for a darshan, and he was just about 2 rows back from the front row. And Swami, this was in the days when Swami was walking around during darshan, and Swami comes up and talks to one of the gentlemen that's sitting just 2 rows ahead of my friend. And Swami has this ability that if he doesn't want you to hear what he's saying, you won't hear it, no matter how close you're sitting. And so it was with my friend. These two people were talking, this person and Swami were talking together. Couldn't hear anything that Swami was saying until a certain question was asked. And apparently it was about free will. And Swami says, free will? There is no free will. The only free will you have is to either identify with your body or to identify with God. That's it.
And do you literally believe that now?
That's the only free will we have. When we identify with our body, then we fall into the Maya and the belief that we're separate from Swami, that we're not good enough, that Swami is there and we are here, that somehow we have to reach Swami, or somehow we have to work towards self-realization or moksha or liberation. And we put these things on a pedestal. We put Swami on a pedestal. We put God realization on a pedestal. We put liberation on a pedestal. When we choose God, then we become that already. That is what we are, and that's what we can only be, is God. And
but how can we avoid choosing the body at times?
See, our body is a tool, right? We're God. We're God beings who've come down. We've decided to play this whole game, this whole experience of living on earth, having so many incarnations. It's all part of a game. It's just like a big play. We're just like children on a playground. That's it. We've come to play and experience and to love. That's all. It's just love, loving itself. That's all we are. And so as long as we choose the body, then we go on through a series of births and rebirths and so forth, and we have different experiences. When we choose God, then we realize that we're God, and that's all we can ever be, and that's all we've ever been, and that's all we will ever be.
So following what you just told me then, up until the time you were on that airplane flying with this gentleman sitting next to you, you weren't ready, you had no free will, and you couldn't have really known about Sai Baba until you had that, what I call this downloading of spiritual awareness, making you ready to learn of Sai Baba?
Timing is part of things. Every fruit has to mature at a certain time. A fruit on a tree, no fruit on the tree, or none of the fruits on a tree will mature at the same time, right? They don't ripen together, they ripen individually. And so also when an individual is ready, then it will happen. Now, they have to choose to ripen. Some people stay raw their whole lives and they never make it to God realization. That's their choice, and that's okay. There's no judgment there. But again, it's all a game. Do you wish to play to lose, or do you wish to play to win? And the winning is to be God realized. That's it. There's no other losing or winning beyond that. It's just to be who you are, which is God.
I want to ask you the question my wife Jody suggested that I ask you. What is it that you think Sai Baba would like you to say today in this format?
Usually when I ask him those questions, he tells me to be quiet and let him talk. And that's all I need to do here.
Mm-hmm. And I want to hear a little bit more about your view on what he calls we have no free will. Does he mean we have just a little free will or zero free will?
We have the free will to choose God or to choose to identify with our body. We can identify with our God selves, or we can choose to identify with our body. Once we make the choice of identifying with this body, then all the other things happen. We identify with our spouse, with our children, with our job, with our work, with our home and our experiences, our events and so forth. Those are all at best transient, ephemeral experiences. You are God daydreaming this entire experience. The people watching this video, you're only God, and that's all that you can ever be. Everything that you have and everything that you're experiencing is simply your own thoughts. It's simply a projection of your mind. That's it. There's nothing beyond God. There's nothing below God. It's just divinity. Whether you want to call it God or Atma, Paramatma, Brahman, Jesus, it doesn't matter. Buddha, it's all the same. It's all the same. The words don't matter. It just is. And that beingness is divinity.
In 20 years of trying to explain this to others and trying to explain it to myself, I still come up short every time, trying to explain the illusion that this is a dream. When people look at me and justifiably say, "What are you, nuts? This isn't a dream. I hear you asking the question. I hear you making the statement. I can feel the wind blowing in my face." How do you grow towards a more satisfactory answer when somebody challenges you about what you just said, that this is a dream we're living?
See, the mind is a tool, and those parts of our God selves, those people, as you refer to them, who are asking these questions are only parts of our God selves, but they're trying to understand that with this tool called the mind. That's all the mind is. It's just a tool. And what we have done, what our souls have done for the last so many hundreds of thousands of births, is allow ourselves to be fooled by the ploys of the mind and by the ego. These are the same voices that tell us that you're not good enough, that you can't do it, that you'll never be able to do this, that you're separate from God, you're a sinner, that you're not worthy of these things. Those are the wrong voices, the voices that tell us that you're not beautiful, that you're not intelligent. We then have to choose to listen to the voice of the divine, which says that you are God and that you're nothing other than God. Names and forms don't matter. What matters is God. Now, these other parts of our God cells, these people who are asking these questions of, what are you talking about? How can you say it's all a dream? Are asking these questions using this tool of the mind. The mind is a wonderful tool, but it remains a tool, and no single tool is capable of understanding all things. When it comes to divinity, the mind has to be put away. It's just a tool. Now, what many of us do is we carry this tool with us all the time. We use it to analyze every single thing that we do. That's kind of like a carpenter who has a saw and a hammer and a screwdriver, carrying them around with him or her wherever they go. You wouldn't bring your saw to your dinner table, nor would you take it to bed. Yet for some reason, we take our mind with us wherever we go, and we expect our mind to be able to comprehend and address and understand everything. It's not capable of that. And to understand divinity, one has to put the mind away, not saying that you forget rational, logical thinking, but that you put the thinking mind away and simply experience, that you allow yourself to be who you are. And that beingness is God.
So when it comes to divinity, you have to put the mind away in lieu of allowing greater space for your center of feeling, for your heart? Is that what you're saying?
Let me give you an analogy. It's like this. When you wish to see a reflection in a pool of water, for example, you can look within the pool, and as you look at your reflection, if there are too many waves in the pool, you won't be able to see your reflection clearly, right? Mm-hmm. So also, if the water is muddy, you will not be able to see your reflection clearly. So what we need to do then is, one, we need to have clean, pure water. For that, we have to remove the negative aspects of ourselves, our faults, our weaknesses, the things that get in the way of our divinity: pride, anger, lust, greed, attachment, envy, and so forth. They have to be removed one by one. Then the waves on that pool of water have to be stilled. Once the waves are stilled, then you can see yourself for who you really are, which is God. You see reflection clearly as God. To still the waves, you need to remove those thoughts. Each thought is like a ripple in that pool of water, and you have to still those. And you can use techniques such as repetition of the divine name, meditation, breathing techniques. It doesn't matter, prayer, whatever, but the mind has to be still. The mind is a tool. Use it appropriately, but when it's done, then put it away.
Srikanth, some people have the gift of clairvoyance, of mysticism at a very early age, and I know you've described that to a certain degree. Why some people and not everybody?
They choose. It's a choice. Right?
Consciously choose?
They choose, perhaps not consciously, but it's a choice. See, we're in this room right now, and there is this physical space separating your body from mine. Within that space, there is air, there are light waves, sound waves, there are X-rays, microwaves, gamma rays. Nowadays, we have cell phone waves, radio waves, television waves. All these different forms of energy are interacting in the space that's all around us and even through us, through our physical bodies. They are here, but they operate at a different frequency, and so we're not able to see all the different waves of energy that are here, correct? Just simply because they're at a frequency that is beyond the ability of our physical eyes to see. Now, if you choose to, you can raise your own frequency to match the frequency of these other dimensions or beings or planes of existence and so forth. That's it. You simply choose. How do you do that? You raise your vibration through spiritual techniques, and that's what Swami's been teaching us for the last so many decades. Daily meditation and prayer, remove your negative qualities, practice the 9-point code of conduct, and so forth. We all know what they are, and that's all you have to do.
I'm going to ask you a very elementary school level question. What's it like to astral travel, and when did you realize that that's possible in our human form for yourself?
So astral travel. A lot of people ask me about that, and what I find is that people who wish to astral travel become fascinated by it because it seems like an easy escape. What astral travel does is that it allows you to realize that you're separate from the body, that you're not your body. Now, all of us astral travel at night in our sleep state. Many of us have had dreams of flying. Those flying dreams are oftentimes when we're traveling through the various astral planes. And many of us have also had dreams in which we are falling in a dream. And that falling is simply our astral body falling back or coming back into our physical body at the end of an astral voyage. So Swami has said that there are 3 planes of existence. This physical plane, in which our consciousness primarily resides, the astral plane, and then above that, the finest or most subtle plane, the causal plane. And they have different names depending on which philosophy you prescribe to. So to travel astrally, one exits the body. To do it consciously, one does it in a conscious way so that you can retain your memory of what happened, and then retain that memory as you return to your body. So when this body was about 28 or 26 years old, I started traveling astrally to visit Swami, and have been doing so on a regular basis since then. I don't need to go and see Swami in the physical form anymore, because if I wish to, I can go and see him on the astral form. I don't need a passport, I don't need a visa, there's no jet lag, there are no Sevadals telling me to Sairam, please move this way and that way. It's very simple and very free. And Swami loves it. There are many, many other souls who are there traveling to see Swami, and we all come, and there's our own protocol, but the devotion of these beings, these yogis, if you will, is so great that for this body to be with them, it is great learning. And so what do? I simply go and I be with Swami for some time. And the first memory of this astral travel occurred about 10 years ago, in which I was with Swami. Swami was in the Purnachandra auditorium, and there was some meeting going on with several staff members at the Institute, and we spoke on that higher plane, and he gave me several instructions on what he wanted to do. Now, is that important? No, it's not important to astral travel. What is important is for you to realize that you are God. And all of these planes, the physical, the astral, the causal, all of these universes, these galaxies, these beings, this massive creation is simply just a small part of who you really are, which is God. So do I suggest astral travel? Nah, it's just a curiosity that we can all do, but it's not at all important.
Do you understand why those who don't astral travel in their conscious state are hugely interested in how others and why others do?
Sure. I've been there and I've done that, and all I can say is it's fun for a little while, it's entertaining for a little while, but is it going to bring you to your goal of life, which is self-realization? No.
When somebody like you or somebody else who's made some headway and is reaping the benefits of their efforts and is enjoying their closeness to their spiritual center of realization that they too are God, why would you choose to use your free will to spend even another second in the world of physicality rather than being with that God Spirit oneness? I'm not asking it very well. Why?
Why stay in the physical body?
Yes.
Ted, why does it matter? You're God, I'm God. Everything is God. Does it matter if this body is in physical form or not? I'm everything. Everything is me. There's nothing else beyond this. Now, when I say I'm everything, I don't mean I, the Srikanth Sola, name and form. That's nothing. If it has name and form, Ted, it's all illusion. If it has name and form, it's all illusion. Srikanth Sola, illusion. Ted Henry, illusion. United States, India, all illusion. Sathya Sai Baba, name and form, all illusion. All that exists at any time or at any place is God. And that's it. That's what you are, and that's all we can ever be.
In the pantheon of spiritual figures, in the roll call of spiritual figures that we could enumerate for an hour probably, how big of a role is Sai Baba for you? I mean, I try to think of the formless, seamless light of God, Creator, that goes beyond Jesus, that goes beyond Rama, Krishna, Baba, Shirdi Sai. How big is Sai Baba specifically for Srikanth?
When you ask questions like Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, Srikanth, Sathya Sai, it's all the same. There's no separation. There's no levels of creation. That is part of the Maya. That's part of the game that we've created for our own enjoyment. There's no one who is any more or any less advanced than anyone else. There's no Sai Baba who's any greater or any less than anyone else. Sai Baba is simply a reflection of who we really are, which is God.
So, in perhaps a corrective measure for people who think they're growing by praying to God, you might suggest you're praying outwardly in the wrong direction. You don't have to go to God because you are God.
You are God, but one has to go through the required stages of growth. For example, if you wish to travel from here to Puttaparthi, you have to travel to the airport, get on the plane, and travel physically to India until you reach Puttaparthi. So also, if you want to travel to the stage of God realization, in which you know that you are God and that everything else is God, and that there's nothing else other than God at any time or place, that's God realization. When you know that, you have to make the trip. And the trip is really just simply from here, your head, to here, your heart. That is, put your mind away and simply be in that state of being. Some practice is required. And for that, Swami has given us so many different principles and recipes for sadhana.
I know you had spiritual teachers before your awakening to the possibility of Sai Baba in your late teens, because I've heard some of your stories. Share with me the highlights of your relationship with your grandfather.
So that's a very good question. So this body's grandfather is a very highly realized soul. Swami's called him a Jivan Mukta, which means one who's liberated while alive. He has no future births unless he chooses to, and he has no further karmas because he's reached a stage in which there's no longer an I. When there's no longer an I, when there's no longer a sense of separation from God, then karma has no target to hit. And so in that state, one is fully liberated. That is, one is fully liberated because one has no desires, one has no attachments. So he lives in that state. And so being in his close proximity as his grandson, then this body had a chance to be with him for a long time and to learn from him. Now, moving away from that duality type thinking, he's simply a reflection of who I am. But let me explain something to you that I think will be interesting. Once a devotee asked Swami, Swami, what's the most important seva that we can do? What's the best seva that we can possibly do? And you know what Swami said? Swami said that the best seva you can do is to become self-realized, to know that you are God. Swami says that when you know that you are God, you reach such a high state of perfection that in your family lineage, going from the present time all the way back to the time that your soul forms were incarnated as rocks, minerals, and so forth, to all times forward, everyone in your family lineage has their spiritual energy raised by 50%. You've simply blessed everyone backwards and forwards in all directions of time by becoming self-realized. That is the best seva that you can do. To be in that state then is the goal of life. And so having a relationship with someone like my grandfather allowed this body then, or me, to move forward to a higher state of awareness.
So of the 6 billion of us, what percentage, what's the number you might put it of those people who are there with self-realization?
Nobody knows. See, we're already self-realized type. We're all God-realized. Don't put self-realization on a pedestal or something separate. You are God. That's all you can ever be. Realize it. The only thing you have to do is stop choosing to identify with your body and choose to identify with God.
But that's it. But that's no small trick, because you can intellectually align yourself with your higher consciousness.
Because you're allowing your mind to rule yourself. You're allowing this mind, which is only an instrument, to tell you what to do. That's it. You're allowing your mind to take control of you instead of you, the God self, taking control of your mind. Your mind is just a tool and you listen to your mind. Yeah, you have to do things that are appropriate. As long as you have a physical body, as long as you have this vehicle, you have to take care of it. You can say that, oh, this life is just a dream, but if somebody hits your dream head with a dream hammer, it's still going to dream hurt. You have to take care of yourself.
I like
you have
the way
to
you
use
put
common
that.
sense. And you have to be practical. You have to be real. At the same time, don't fall for the delusion that there's any separation from anything. Nothing is separate from anything. It is all God. That's all that it can ever be. And when you find your mind coming back, just put it back in its toolbox. Say, mind, thank you very much, but I don't need you right now. Get back into your toolbox. When the ego rears its ugly head, when you think that you want to be separate or special or different from somebody else, just say, thank you very much, ego. You know, I've had about enough of you these last 10,000 lifetimes. Get back into your toolbox. I'm simply going to be God. And what will happen is that first, your mind and your ego says, you don't really mean that. He's just kidding. What a card. But after some time, when you keep practicing, they really get the hint and they will go away. They might come up every now and then, but they'll go away. Now, the mind is a tool, so use it when it's appropriate for your work, for your activities, and so forth. If you need to plan a trip, if you need to go somewhere, if your children or others have activities that need to be done, use your mind. It's simply a tool, but don't carry your tool around with you wherever you go. When you're done, put it back into its toolbox. And when you need it again, it'll be right there and you can use it again.
In your dream world, in your dream career, you're a cardiologist wrapping up a great stint at the world-famous Cleveland Clinic en route to Baba's Superespecialty Hospital in Bangalore. Did you ever think of spending your life in a different profession that might have complemented your spiritual journey more?
A different profession. This body has had many lifetimes as healers, and so it's natural that in this particular lifetime that this body would work as a cardiologist. It just is what happened. And it was done this way according to Swami's guidance. That is, simply asked Swami, what do you want me to do? He said, do this, 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 and it was done. And that's all. So it was natural, it was inevitable, I guess, that I would become a cardiologist. Now, did I imagine that Swami would ever call me and say, through different means, come to my hospital and work in Bangalore, give up everything you have? No. But once he said that to me from within and through external forms, then it became clear that that's the chance, that's the choice, that's the appropriate path for me. And so it just happened. And so what I did is simply just say, okay, and give up everything that is here. And now I'm en route to Bangalore to begin this new stage of life there.
So is that called trust, or is that called surrender, what you're doing?
I guess you could call it surrender. Swami says surrender is seeing oneness. That's his definition, seeing oneness. And so do I see any difference from being in Cleveland or working at the world-famous Cleveland Clinic, the #1 heart center in the world, versus working in Swami's hospital in Bangalore where I take care of patients for free? No, it's no different. It's the same Maya. It's the same Maya in the US, it's the same Maya in Bangalore, India. It's the same.
So as long as you see and recognize the Maya for what it is, you could be doing anything.
Doesn't matter. I could be a ditch digger and it would be the same.
For those who wish to find him, is Sai Baba equally accessible, do you think, to all people?
Sai Baba is all that is. God is all that is. He's you. Everyone is Sai Baba.
What
Everyone
about
is
the
God.
Jews and Christians who believe?
It's all the same. It's all the same. Names and forms don't matter.
Jody and I heard you talk about 3 types of self-realization, and you've just talked a fair amount about it right now. Complete self-realization being one, meditative self-realization when you're in meditation, and then from time to time, those who only have an intellectual concept of self-realization. Who do you see included in this third group? Sai Baba devotees, people who are on a profound spiritual path, or who would you tag with having that going for them spiritually?
Well, it's not my place to judge or label others because I don't see others as separate from myself. But what Swami has said is that there are 3 levels of, or 3 different types, if you will, of self-realization. The least common kind is the permanent type, in which a soul lives in God realization 100% of the time, with every breath and with every heartbeat. The second type is the most common type, and that's where many yogis and Swamijis fall into, and that's where in their very high state of self-realization while they're in their meditation, and then they come out, or when they come out of those meditative type states, they may be in a lower but still somewhat evolved type state. And the third type is a temporary type of self-realization in which one knows that he or she is God from time to time, or because of the grace of the Kali Yuga, has an intellectual awareness that they are God. Swami has said that because of the special grace of the Kali Yuga, even this third type, that is even the intellectual type, will still have grace, and when their birth is up, they'll have no more karmas left to extinguish.
I would guess that's a large
grace.
crowd of people.
Potentially, but here's what happens, is that as soon as you fall back into the delusion that you are God, that you are not God, as soon as you fall back into the delusion that you are separate from God and that there is an I that is not God, then karma has a target to hit, and you then become involved in additional births.
Excuse me for putting it so bluntly, but is this something akin to faking it till you make it, going around telling yourself you're God, and therefore you become God?
You know, the Sathya Sai avatar has only given us one mantra to repeat, and that is to say every day that I am God, I am God, I am God, I am not different from God. When you condition the mind to such thinking, then eventually you believe it. When you believe it, you become it. That's all. That's the truth. That's who you really are.
So you really do have to exercise towards really inculcating that concept to the point where you are it. You don't just
are
believe
God.
it.
You are it. Swati is you and you are Sai Baba. Now, many people, when they do their prayers, when they do their repetition of the divine name, or whatever it is, they see God as something separate from themselves. Let's say you're repeating Sai Ram as your Namasmarana, just for example, or Jesus Christ, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. As long as you continue to see that name and form separate from yourself, you're still living in delusion. When you understand that you are that Sai Ram, you are that Jesus, you are that Buddha, you are that Allah, you are that, then you understand that there's no separation, there's no difference between you and that. It's simply beingness. It is simply the I, that I am presence, which is God.
So what might make a good prayer or a good mantra for a person?
Any are fine. Simply lose the separation that says that you are separate or different from God.
So you don't pray to God because that would cause separation.
See, it's part of the stage. Is at first, sure, go ahead and pray to God and go along your spiritual path as you know best. But eventually you have to move beyond the separation that you are and God are separate. Eventually one has to understand that God is not different from you, that you are that God. You are God, and that's all that you can ever be. That's all that you ever will be. And everything that you see, hear, feel, experience is just God.
You talked recently, I just heard you a couple of weeks ago talk about a lesson that you've learned regarding the giving of advice. This can also incur karma, something I've never really been familiar with before, for the advice giver, presumably if you give the wrong advice. Can you talk a little bit more about this?
Sure. And this is why Swami recommends against giving advice and simply doing what we do, which is just to share. We just share light and love, and that's all we do. But Swami has said to several close devotees who have shared this with me, that when we give advice in a particular situation, that we have potential for incurring karma from that act. That is, if that person then takes that advice and acts upon it, and he or she has a certain event or experience because of that advice that he or she attributes to you, then there's karma associated with that. So one has to be very careful in giving advice. As Swami explains, to give advice is oftentimes to only add advice to a particular situation. So one has to be careful.
To add advice.
Yes. Now, a related
and this does not apply, I'm sure, to parents of young children where they have a duty to raise them as well as they can. But
a parent's duty is to raise our children to be God beings, the God selves that they are. That's the highest duty that a parent can do. Now, Swami said something very interesting about parenting. And again, he's told this to a close friend of mine. He says that depending on the culture, for the first 7 years of one's life, the body is learning to master its physical body, that is, how to move, how to walk, talk, and so forth. The next 7 years we spend learning how to master, to some degree, usually not very well, unfortunately, our emotions. And the last 7 years, again, give or take a few years depending on the culture, we start to learn how to manage the intellectual or mental aspects of ourselves. After the age of 21, perhaps earlier for some cultures, if the parents interfere with the free will choices or the life decisions of that child, they gain 50% of the karma of that child's act.
Even if what they believe in their heart is giving good advice to their child.
You get 50% of the karma. Now you can guide, you can provide reflection, you can be a sounding board for your child's decisions. That's okay, that's part of your duty as a parent. But if you go and interfere with what that child is doing, then you get 50% of the karma. The child has to be able to learn on his or her own. And hopefully you've equipped the child during the first 21 years or more of its life before that to be able to have the discrimination, understand what is right or wrong, to be able to tune into the divine within him or herself so that she or he can understand what God wants for him. If the child can do that, then your work is done, because you know that God will help that child to understand what they need to do.
It sounds like you might be better off offering no advice, no help, no assistance of any kind.
As a parent, your duty is always to be there for your children. I think most of us would agree with that. But when we interfere with our adult children, then we take on karma. Sometimes we may feel that we have no choice.
What if advice is asked for by, let's say, a 26-year-old daughter?
Then you can give, but again, remember not to interfere.
So interference is the real key here.
Exactly.
And most of us would know when our advice crosses the border into perhaps interference. And that would probably also go for material offers of interference.
Giving money, for example.
Yeah.
When you give money to your adult children, you may do so, but understand that there's karma attached to you for giving that money. Now, you can give that money to a child as a loan and then expect that to be paid back. That's fine. But if you're giving money to, in a sense that you're interfering again, then you are incurring karma.
Do you understand how that's such a radically new concept? I think here in the West we're weaned on the idea of being of assistance, being of counsel, advice, solace to our loved ones throughout the bulk of their lives.
Sure, that's throughout many, many cultures. But we have to remember that each of us has to find God within ourselves, and we can push our children to do that, but we can't interfere in their lives for them.
Well, let me see what we've got here. You talk about God a lot, and I was going to ask you to go beyond the image of Krishna and Jesus and Sai Baba. Define God. Define the I Am presence if you can.
So you're asking me to do something with the mind that can't be done.
Well,
God
I realize that, but you might have a
experienced.
different slant on it than I have that could be useful.
It's not possible to define what is. That's all that is. God is simply beingness. God is everything. To put words and names to God is simply to struggle to fall short of what is. I mean, you can say that God is love. God is infinite being, God is everything. But that still falls far, far, far short of what God is. God is everything and you are God, but at the same time that God is nothing. This whole creation that we see is simply nothing. And in that nothingness, there is God.
And back 1 second to the idea of advising to the point where you interfere in anyone's life. And this could hit close to home, but I feel inspired to ask it, and that is, in India, for example, choosing spouses for kids. It's part of the Indian tradition. Presumably, it's part of the tradition of other peoples around the world. That could backfire big time.
Sure. Now, one has one's duty, and we can always provide some degree of guidance or suggestions to our children, but it's the interference that is the key word here. It's your intention. Sometimes we as parents try to control our children, and when we do that, we are taking on karma from their actions.
Visiting with Sai Baba on the astral level and seeing other entities around Baba, you mentioned that you a bit about talking to Baba. When you go into meditation and you're shown numerous spiritual figures, can you describe a little more clearly some of whom you see, who they are, and do you also talk to them?
Sure, but they're only parts of myself. Whether they come as names as Mahavatar Babaji, Krishna, Rama, Hanuman, Sita, it makes no difference. They're simply aspects of myself, the God self, not the Srikanth Sola self. That's name and form, that's illusion. They're simply different aspects of the one self, which is God.
Okay. People ask me why I visit Sai Baba in India, and you know, Jody and I go every year. It's our 12th or 13th trip coming up, and I know there's no need to go, and you've already given a good reason why there's no need to go. You get on this invisible airplane and go there for free. Why do you go in the physical form? Why do you go see Sai Baba?
If he calls us to go physically, we'll go.
Is there something extra that can be gained from it, do you think? Should other people consider
Sometimes
doing
being
that?
in the vibration of the physical form is very helpful, but at the same time, remember that the Maya around Sathya Sai Baba's physical form is very, very, very strong, very strong. And so when you're in his physical presence, the tendency is to see him as separate, as distinct from yourself. And you just have to constantly remind yourself that when you're in the presence of the avatar, that the Maya is so strong that you're going to see him as separate or as distinct from you. Who is the avatar? You are the avatar. Everyone here is an incarnation of God. Everyone. Everyone is God. That's all that is, and that's all that can ever be. That's all that you will ever be is God. And that's it. But the Maya, that is this illusion that you yourself have created, allows you or causes you to see these things as different or distinct from God.
And that, of course, is Baba's message first, middle, and last. But we have so much difficulty because frankly, our physical form gets in the way. How does your spirituality help you when you surely become dissatisfied at times, when you are fearful perhaps, or when you feel low or even depressed? How does your spirituality pull you away from that?
When I feel low or depressed, I don't know. Not sure that happens very much. But I guess if I did, I'd simply tune back into God and just be. What I do is in my daily practice, that is in this body's physical activities of the day. Start the day remembering Swami, knowing that God is everything. Thank him for the opportunity to worship him and glorify him through the actions and words and thoughts of the day. I take some time to be with him in the morning. For me, my daily meditation, my morning meditation, is my appointment with Swami. It's my interview with Swami. It's my chance to be with him, to speak with him. And what I do is I'm simply with my God self that day. And I get guidance for the day. Many times we wake up in the morning, we look at the newspaper, we see what the weather is like, we see what's the latest news, the headlines and so forth. For me, the latest headlines are what Swami tells me to do for that day. He says, do this, this, and this today. And so it is, and it will happen just like that. And then as I go throughout the day, I simply breathe in God, and I breathe out God. I allow God to breathe through me, I allow God to speak through me, I allow God to think through me, I allow God to act through this body, I allow God to give his darshan through his body, I allow God to give his love through this body. And when I interact with my patients, I can choose to interact with them on a physical level, that is, Dr. Srikanth Sola interacting with patient so-and-so. Or what I like to do is choose to interact with them from my God self, that is who I am, which is God, to their God self. And when I do that, transformation really happens. When I tell a patient of mine, you need to quit smoking, you need to exercise, you need to lose weight, you need to eat a better diet, when I say it from the aspect of the God self and speak to their God self, that's when transformation happens. When I speak to them from the aspect of Srikanth Sola to their own ego self, then maybe something happens, maybe it doesn't. It's when there's that God-to-God interaction that transformation truly happens. And so that's how I try to live my life. If the body is tired, or there's been a lot of change on the physical plane from whatever, then I realize that and I know that. But just as the sun is covered by clouds for a little while, I know that the clouds will eventually go away. And so even though for a short time I may be seeing and involved in the Maya that's around me, I know that eventually that'll go away and I'll be back to my God self.
It's one of Baba's favorite sayings,
it passing
clouds, passing
it's
clouds.
It's all passing clouds. It's all part of the play. It's just a play. We're here, Ted, just to play. It's all a game. That's all.
How has, in light of this, how has Sai Baba transformed your life through play? How have you changed?
I haven't changed. I'm God. That's it.
And for somebody looking at this who's coming from a very conservative tradition of whichever religion and sees that as blasphemy, what can you do to try to inform them that you're speaking from your whole center of truth?
You don't have to do anything. You just have to be your God self. Simply being in that presence, in that vibration of Godness is enough, and your vibration will uplift others around you. You don't have to do anything. Your physical space that your body is in will become a Prashanti Nilayam at that time, and everyone who walks into your aura, into your energy field, will be uplifted. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to teach anything. You don't have to do anything. You simply have to be. That's it.
A lot of people try to be through the steps they learn through introductory spirituality 101 courses called meditation and so forth. You just mentioned that your morning meditation is to talk to Baba. Others learn that to meditate correctly, they free themselves as much as they're capable of their thoughts. What about the millions who try meditation but have great trouble concentrating or slowing their thoughts or even focusing just on something of the divine? How can they move beyond these limitations?
Do Sai devotees have trouble concentrating, Ted?
I would
common
say
occurrence.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a common occurrence because we choose to love the things of this world more than we love God. And that's why we struggle. We start to think about our work, about our family, about the errands that must be done, about whatever. Because we love the things of this world more than we love God, our concentration wavers. Now, there are different techniques that one can use to help strengthen concentration. In the meditation workshops that this body does, or the meditation talks that others have done, there are techniques you can learn, and they're very simple, using the breath, using sound, and so forth. But the meditation technique itself is not the goal. It doesn't matter whether you do Kriya Yoga or Vipassana meditation or transcendental meditation or whatever. It doesn't matter. The technique is not the goal. The goal is God realization. And what I see many devotees doing is they're so focused, even the advanced ones, on their technique, on doing their kriyas, on saying their japa, their meditation, their namasmara, whatever it is, that they lose sight of what they really are, which is God.
Mm-hmm.
The technique is not the goal. The technique is simply an instrument. It's a tool. God is the goal. God realization is the goal. Know that you are God, and that's all that you can ever be.
Some of these questions that I'm thinking of asking you really don't even pertain, and yet on a worldly level they do, such as, are we near the time when Sai Baba will enable himself to be seen and known by greater numbers of people? I mean, if you believe yourself to be Sai Baba, it's a moot point, but for those in the majority who don't yet believe that, what's your answer to that? We keep hearing that Baba's form, his presence is going to be universally felt soon.
Once Swami was asked by a devotee on the physical plane, when will you be known on a worldwide level? And Swami says that he's come before in many forms, many avatars, Rama, Krishna, and others before those. In those devotees will be coming back. He says the devotees, for example, who were with him when Sathya Sai was a young boy, were those who, because of their karma, because of the good acts or punya that they had done, had earned the merit that allowed them to be with Sai Baba in his physical form at a young age. When their karma was up, then their time with Swami was up and they went on their own ways. Now, Swami has said that over this last several decades, many of his prior devotees, his previous devotees, have been coming back to him. And he said that when the last devotee comes back to him, then the whole world will know about him.
Wow.
When that is, only Swami knows.
Of all the great lessons Swami has taught you, I think I know what the greatest is, that you are Swami, that we are God. what are some of the other significant lessons that you've picked up that you know come directly from him?
Love is everything. Love is the basis for this entire creation. If you want to advance quickly, if you want to know what the supercharged turbo technique for sadhana is to bring you straight to God, it's simply to love. Just love everyone and love everything as if it were God. Love yourself as if you were God. Love yourself. Many devotees tell themselves, but yeah, this is fine for Dr. Srikanth because he's been doing this for so many lifetimes. Maybe he was a yogi in his lifetime, whatever. It doesn't matter. Love yourself. You are good enough. You can do it. You are divine. And love yourself as a divine being. Love yourself as a child of God. And then understand that you are God. That's all you can ever be. Love is the key to transforming yourself and transforming this world. If you look at all the problems that our world is undergoing right now, whether it's in our environment, in our politics, in our educational system, in our whatever, any system that you can imagine, love and consciousness related to love are the key ingredients that will allow us to raise our world to one in which it becomes a divine world, which we literally have heaven on earth, in which we have manifested Ram Raj, or the age of Rama all over again. And Swami says that that will happen. The Sathya Sai Avatar is here, and we will be living in a golden age in which we know that we are God, and we will be living from that consciousness.
This might be the toughest question I can ask you. If you do love yourself, because that's the only path that's really open to any of us, how do you feel when you lose a patient, when somebody near you dies way too early?
I don't have attachments to the physical forms of the patient. Remember, there's no death. Birth and death are only illusions created by the mind. There's no birth, there's no death. It simply is beingness. When another God self, another part of myself wishes to transition on, then that's appropriate for them. That's all.
About that point you just said, I know the customary belief is our souls last for eternity. But I think most people are under the perhaps mistaken notion that they were born. You're saying there's no birth?
There's no birth, there's no death. Sure, your physical body has a birth.
I'm not talking about that.
As long as you identify with your physical form, then you'll have the ideas of birth and death. You'll have ideas of reincarnation even, but those are not relevant when you know that you are God.
But the soul that comes into each physical form, that soul has always been.
It's always been.
No beginning, no end.
Time itself is an illusion.
Tell me about finding equanimity. Have you found it?
That's all it is, right? Sure, sometimes when Maya comes in place, there may be some excitement or irritation. Maybe when the body is tired, I may get a little grumpy every now and then. But those are all passing clouds. It happens very, very briefly and very shortly. And I go back into the God self that I am. That's it.
And for those who do find equanimity, let's say with Sai Baba, why don't they just simply choose to stay there rather than to re-enter the world of pain, disillusionment, and disappointment?
Stay where?
Stay with Baba, whether it's in their family room or whether it's in Puttaparthi and they're living in a flat 100 yards from his home. In other words, it's a second attempt to ask a question that I asked earlier about once you know with greater clarity who you are and who Baba really is in your life, that he is you and you are he, why continue being the shoemaker who runs the risk of having your business
when you are God, why bother to take a birth again? Right?
Yes.
Because it doesn't matter if you have a physical form or not. You're everything. You're aware of everything at all times. You are everything. There's
so
no
in the
separation
physical
from
form,
anything.
just go with the flow, whether it's good, bad, you win the lottery or your business gets burned down.
Don't make a distinction between this physical form and that physical form.
Mm-hmm.
You're all of it. You're everything. All those forms and all the names and everything that you see are only you. So whether there's one other form or not one other form, it makes no difference. You're all of it at all times. All 6 billion people on this earth, plus all the other billions of beings that are associated with this planet, are all only you.
Let me see if I can refine it a little bit more. How are people to spiritually handle calamity, natural disaster, deranged people hurting other people around you? You talked about the front page headlines that you glance at every morning, and then you find out what's the headlines you're supposed to be associated with Baba. What about in the newspaper headline where people are dying around us and suffering all sorts of calamities? How do you relate to that?
Those are unfortunate events that are related to soul learning. That's different aspects of our God self, simply learning to be the God that they are. That's it. They're simply learning. And in that learning, everything that we see, all the calamities, all the disasters, all the tragedies, everything is just perfect. Everything is just as it should be.
Everything is as needs
Your
be.
role is to keep, as Swami says, your role during all of these, whenever there's a natural disaster, Swami has said this, your role is to keep your heart straight, to know that you are God and to be in that God space, and to send love and light to those who need it. If you can physically assist them, then good, go and do so. But your role is to keep your heart straight. The news, and maybe I shouldn't say this because I'm talking to a newscaster,
okay.
but many of the news unfortunately tends to be on a very lower vibration, carrying a very negative energy with it. And when we get sucked into that energy, we forget that we are God, and we get drawn into sadness and pity and empathy and fear. And especially when we're in that state of fear, we very quickly become dissociated from our God self.
I'm glad you did mention it. I actually liken it to a form of addiction, not just for the people in that business, but for the people who are the consumers.
Very much so.
You almost want to know about other people's calamities, if for no other reason to make you feel better about your own position.
That fear is a very low vibration energy that separates you from God and keeps you away from your God self. Again, it's your ego and your mind worrying about your physical body because you're worried that something is going to happen to you, or perhaps something is going to happen to your loved one. Instead, realize that you are God and that everything is divine, that everything is in perfect divine order. Now, that doesn't mean that you sit around doing nothing all day. You have to do your work. As long as you are in a physical vehicle, you have to do your duty, whether that's as a physician or a newscaster, a father, a mother, a brother, a sister. You have your duties to do. The body is meant to work. It's not meant to stay still. So you have to do your duties. And as a divine being, you should use your vehicle to the best of your abilities. If you're a physician, an engineer, a lawyer, a scientist, whatever it is, do your duty to the best of your ability. Be the very best at whatever it is you have to do at all times.
So why is there an emotion such as compassion, for example? Is compassion part of Maya, or is it part of being love?
Compassion is part of love, but there's some separation attached to that compassion.
For those who see this discussion today, and who are now just awakening to a spiritual path, and I'm really attracted to that group of people. I don't know how big or small it is, but it seems to be somebody I've thought about a lot. How can they best advance themselves, assuming this has piqued their curiosity just a little bit more than is already the
Simple.
case?
Just love. Just love. Love yourself and love God, love others, and love everyone as if they were God. That's it.
Baba speaks to people I know often as an inner voice. Many of us don't hear it because we're not listening or we don't know how to listen. How can people better learn to hear the inner voice of God?
It's a wonderful question. Wonderful question. Just imagine if all of us lived our lives with God's guidance to us every day. If every time we did something, if we stopped and said, "Is this what you want me to do, Lord? Yes, no, how should I do this better?" If you just stopped before you did something, every moment, just for half a second, or as you're doing it, just make sure, just check in with God. Make sure that's what He wants for you. Make sure that's His will for your body. How transformed our lives would be. What an amazing place this world would be if everything that we did came from the divine self instead of our ego self or our body self. There's simply 4 steps to tuning into God. It's very, very simple. The first and most important step to listening to God's voice within yourself is to be quiet. Just be quiet. That's why we learn meditation. That's why we do breathing exercises. That's why we still the mind through prayer and reflection. Just be quiet. Swami says that it's only in the depths of silence that the voice of God can be heard. You need that stillness within to receive the divine guidance.
Might that be the primary purpose of meditation?
No, the purpose of meditation is merging with God, to know that you are God. But meditation allows the waves on that pool of water to be stilled. And when you have a still pool, you can get clear and concise, very clear and perfect perception of what God wants for you.
Part 2.
We think that, why would God want to talk to me? Now, going back to a separation type of thinking, if we think that we are children of God, if we're God's children, wouldn't we want our parent, our father or mother, divine father, mother, to talk to us? If we have children, when we teach them how to behave, when we teach them how to think and learn and be in this world, we talk to them so that they understand what they want, what we want of them. And so also, if we're God's children, why wouldn't God talk to us? God talks to all of us all the time. So the very first step is to be quiet. The second step is to breathe. The breath is like your divine link to God. Now, by breathing, I don't mean just simple shallow breathing that we do with our chest, but deep abdominal breathing, silently and quietly, but the breath that allows the divine breath to come in and allows your mind to become still. The slower the breath, the slower the mind, and the slower the mind, the slower the breathing. And so using the breath as a vehicle to tune into God is very simple. And the last two steps are very, very easy. Simply trust that God is going to talk to you, because He will, and then allow Him to do so. You don't have to strain, you don't have to struggle to allow God's voice there. He's always broadcasting His messages and His wisdom to you. It's simply for us to receive it. So you have to be quiet, you have to breathe, you have to trust that God is going to speak to you, and then you have to allow His messages to come through.
And two final points, and one has to do with this one. How do you thereby trust that you're hearing the correct voice of God?
Very good question. How do you know if it's really Swami? This is a very good question. You know, once I had a devotee who came to see me. She was in the ashram and she was meditating, and she heard a voice say from within herself, say, you have a very serious heart condition. One of your heart valves is not working properly. If you don't go and get it fixed soon, you're going to die. Very terrifying type of message to get, especially when you're in the ashram. You hear this, that if you don't do this, you're going to be dead. And so she comes, rushes to see me thousands of miles away, the best heart hospital in the whole world, the Cleveland Clinic, etc., etc. And I see her, and she's completely fine. Nothing is wrong with her. And then after we get to talking, then she tells me this experience that she had. Now, if you look at her experience, you see it's exactly opposite what God would have done. If you were talking to Swami, how would you feel? You would feel loving, you'd feel happy, you'd feel very, very peaceful. And so also when God talks to you from within, God's voice from within, God's messages to you from within should be the voice of love and the voice of peace. God should be speaking to you in love and peace. If it's really God, it's really going to be with that feeling of love and peace. So that's the first test you have to do, and you should test each and every message you get from the within, is what's the feeling that you get? Do you feel loving and peaceful from that message? If the answer is no, then move on. You're not tuned into God. If the answer is yes, then go on to the next step. What's the content of the message or the guidance that you're getting? When Swami speaks to you from within, His guidance to you will be exactly in harmony with everything that He teaches to us on the physical plane. He's not going to tell you any different than what's in His spoken discourses or in His Vahini series and so forth. Everything that Swami says to you will be in guidance with His teachings. So first step is, what is the feeling? Second step is, what is the content? And the third step is, what is your own state? If you have attachment or desire for the message, if you are attached to the outcome of the message that you're getting, there's a very good chance that you're going to get static, that you're going to either one, not hear Swami correctly, or two, even worse, distort the messages that come through. So the third step is, what is your own inner state at the time that you're getting guidance from Swami? Are you distraught and mentally attached or nervous about what you're asking about? Are you peaceful, calm, and at ease and totally unattached to the outcome of what you're getting guidance from?
So let's test drive this philosophy right now. My last point is not going to be a question to you, but it's just going to be opening a door for you. And that is, from Srikanth Sola, any final comment to wrap this up with that you would like to add that might be useful to anyone on any level for any reason?
Just love. Just love, that's all. Love with all your heart and all your being. Love yourself, love others, and love God. And in that love, still your mind, still your ego, and see that you are that God that you've been loving, and that's all that you can ever be.
Srikanth, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted.
Sai Ram.
Sai Ram. You think of something as God separate from yourself, then you get all those questions, right? Mm-hmm. How do I find God? How do I see God? How do I perceive Him? But those questions are something that someone who is seeing God as different, something outside themselves would ask.